They fired AI. Now they're rehiring the humans it replaced, and the scale of it is bigger than almost anyone covering this story has actually reported, because most of the reversals are happening quietly without a press release, while the layoff headlines keep running. Ford spent the last 3 years bringing back more than 350 veteran engineers. Not new hires, the same kind of experienced staff the company had quietly been phasing out as automated quality control systems took over the factory floor. If the replacement actually worked, this doesn't happen. So what went wrong, and why did it take 3 years to notice? The automated systems Ford put in place were fast, cheap, and technically functional, right up until they started missing defects. Real ones. Not cosmetic flaws, but the kind of manufacturing errors that turn into recalls, safety complaints, and eventually, lawsuits. Ford's Vice President of Vehicle Hardware Engineering, Charles Poon, called AI a fantastic tool, but added that its effectiveness depends entirely on the quality of the data it's trained on. Translation, in plain language. The system missed exactly what a 20-year veteran wouldn't have missed. Ford didn't quietly patch the gap with a software update. It rebuilt an entire tier of experienced staff from scratch at real cost after already paying the cost of letting them go. And Ford wasn't the only company that had to relearn this lesson the hard way. Klarna became the industry's favorite case study for AI replacing customer service outright, cutting human agents, routing nearly all support through an AI system, and getting cited constantly by outlets far beyond this one as proof the model finally worked at scale. So what actually happened when that model met real, angry, complicated customers? Customer satisfaction dropped sharply enough that the company reversed course entirely and resumed hiring human agents for anything beyond the simplest, most scripted requests. Klarna's own leadership has since said, publicly, that investing in high-quality human support represents the company's future direction, a remarkable reversal from a company that spent roughly 2 years being held up worldwide as the counterexample to everything this video is about. If the poster child for this trend had to walk it back, what does that tell you about everyone who copied its playbook without the resources to notice the problem as fast? And the third case might be the strangest one yet, because on paper, it should have been the safest bet. It was a well-capitalized, risk-averse bank, exactly the kind of institution you'd expect to test something like this carefully before rolling it out. Commonwealth Bank of Australia ran a nearly identical experiment, replacing more than 40 customer service employees with AI-powered voice bots designed to handle routine account inquiries. Ordinary customer questions, not edge cases, not unusual disputes, started overwhelming the system almost immediately, and call volumes spiked instead of dropping the way the business case had projected. The bank restored the staffing it had cut, quietly, without much fanfare. 3 companies, 3 completely different industries, the exact same failure shape playing out independently. Which raises the obvious question, is there a company anywhere where this actually worked as intended? IBM handed its human resources operations to an AI system, and unlike the others, the system actually worked. Genuinely, measurably worked. It successfully handled roughly 94% of incoming employee requests without any human involvement at all. That's not a failure story by any reasonable definition. That's most of an entire job function, done well, by a machine, at a company with the engineering resources to build it properly the first time. So what exactly was hiding inside the 6% it couldn't touch? Requests involving ethical judgment, a dispute over the circumstances of a termination, a sensitive accommodation request tangled up in someone's personal medical history, the kind of case with no clean rule to apply, and nothing close enough in the training data for the system to pattern match against. IBM's Chief Human Resources Officer, Nicole Lamoureux, said it plainly at a recent industry summit. If a company stops investing in entry-level hires now, there is no talent pipeline left in 3 to 5 years. The well simply dries up, in her words. IBM has since announced plans to triple its entry-level hiring across the United States, a direct response to what that 6% revealed. 94% success at the most sophisticated version of this anyone has built, and it still wasn't enough to fully replace the humans. So if the best executed attempt at this still hits a wall, what does that actually tell you about every less careful company that tried the same thing with a fraction of the planning? That it was never an execution problem to begin with. It's systemic, and the data backs that up from more than one direction at once. Staffing firm Robert Half found that nearly 1 in 3 U.S. hiring managers, 32%, who eliminated a role primarily because of I have already rehired for that exact role, or something functionally identical to it. Picture 100 companies that made this exact cut over the past year. 32 of them are already quietly undoing it, right now, without a press release. None of these are small, obscure companies experimenting on the margins, and these are firms sophisticated enough to build custom AI systems in the first place, which makes the reversal even harder to explain away as bad execution. Workforce planning firm Orgvue went further, surveying business leaders directly, and found that 55% who laid off staff specifically for I now call that decision a mistake, in plain terms. That's not a fringe result from a handful of unhappy executives. That's an outright majority admitting the plan didn't work. So how much bigger does this get before it stops being called a trend and just becomes the default outcome everyone expects? Research firm Gartner already has an answer to that question. It's forecasting that half of all companies that blamed AI for their headcount cuts will have reversed those decisions by 2027, and often, notably, under new job titles, which means the reversal won't even show up cleanly in any headline or database tracking this. Which means the number you're seeing reported today, large as it already looks, is almost certainly smaller than the real one happening quietly behind it. There's even a rough pattern researchers have started to notice in how this typically plays out. A company announces the AI is taking over a role. The staff gets downsized, 6 to 12 months pass, and the AI ends up successfully managing somewhere around 60% of what the job actually required, leaving the other 40%, the messy, judgment-heavy part, completely unhandled, until the original employees get a phone call asking them to come back. Here's why this keeps happening over and over at companies that should know better. The layoffs were never actually based on what AI could do in practice. They were based on what AI was projected to do on a spreadsheet months or years before anyone ran the experiment at real, messy, human scale. A 94% success rate sounds close enough to full replacement to round up to on a slide in a boardroom. In practice, it means 1 in 17 interactions still needed a human who was no longer there to take the call. Multiply that gap across millions of interactions a year, across an entire company, and a rounding error on a spreadsheet turns into recalls, churn, public complaints, and eventually, the far less visible cost of rehiring and retraining the exact people who were let go in the first place. That's not a hypothetical. It's happening today, inside HR departments, call centers, and factory floors that all made the same bet at the same time. And there is a second layer to this story that almost nobody covering it is connecting yet. The same companies discovering, expensively, that they cannot fully replace their workforce with AI are also the companies paying the rapidly rising token bills behind all of it, and the two labs actually selling those tokens are both about to answer to public shareholders for the first time in their history. Anthropic filed confidentially for an initial public offering back in June, reportedly targeting a valuation approaching $1 trillion, with a debut that could come as early as October. OpenAI, valued not far behind at roughly $850 billion, is expected to follow not long after. So, if the actual return on AI labor replacement keeps looking this uneven, this close to two of the largest public debuts in the history of technology, what exactly happens to the growth story either company is about to sell to the entire investing world?